Hey, this is Henry Kathman wishing you a very happy Pokemon Day and welcoming you to my newest project, the Pokébros Show. So what you're going to be listening to is the first episode of this hopefully weekly or bi-weekly podcast in which myself and my good friend Richard recap the Pokemon Anime. We're both extremely excited to produce this show for you, not just because Pokemon is something we're very, very passionate about, but also having the opportunity to produce content for you guys at a more frequent rate. So just a quick couple of notes before we actually begin the show. Even though I've been at this game for about over a year at this point, there's still a couple of things I'm a bit rusty at when it comes to content creation. One of those being audio engineering. So while the audio issues in this podcast are nowhere near as bad as some of my earlier videos, you might still expect a couple of clicks and weird cuts in the audio at certain point, though we are currently looking into more fixes in terms of getting a better recording space, better learning how to engineer audio properly, and hopefully while we make those changes, the current state of the audio will not diminish your enjoyment of the show. One second thing to note is that the second episode of this podcast has already been recorded and is currently undergoing the editing process right now. So if you notice that we say something wrong or if there's a correction that will be needed to be made, just know that we won't be able to address this until 2 episodes from now. But we still hope to be cognizant of any problems and issues you might have with this program right now. And just one little explanation to get out of the way first. I expect that some people would hope that this podcast would go on a secondary channel. Rest assured, my current usual content of video essays and the sort of stuff you've come to expect from this channel are still coming and will still be going production, same as usual, but this show is meant to be sort of a little extra something that you guys can enjoy from me at a more frequent rate to compensate for the extremely long video production end up occurring while I make the content that you enjoy. I might consider putting these podcasts on a secondary channel in the future, though a problem with YouTube right now is that the current content creators program makes owning a second channel, especially for someone as small as I am, extremely difficult. But that is something that I will be keeping in mind. Lastly, if you enjoy this show, there are a multiple amount of ways that you can either listen to or share this show on social media. So the first thing, not only will this show be hosted on YouTube, but we will also be hosting it on SoundCloud as well. Both Richard and I are currently looking into other podcast hosting websites like Podbean, Libsyn, and iTunes, but for the time being, while we get those sorted out, the main ways that you can listen to this show are on YouTube and SoundCloud. If you enjoy this show, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this show around to people who you think might like it. Another thing you could do to support this show is you could follow our Twitter account and our Tumblr account. These 2 sites are going to be where we're not only going to be giving updates to when the show is going to be posted, but also posting stuff like fan art, Pokemon music, and anything Pokemon related that we're interested in. On our Twitter, you can follow us at The Pokébros Show, and on our Tumblr, we are at goldenrodradio.tumblr.com. And one last thing, if you have questions for us and if you have any comments that you would like to say to us personally, you can email us at goldenrodcityradio@gmail.com. With all of that said, thank you very much for listening to this show. We hope you enjoy it. Best wishes. Live from the Goldenrod Radio Tower in beautiful Goldenrod City, it's the Pokébros Podcast with Richard Ballman and Henry Kathman. Hello and welcome to the Pokébros Show. My name is Henry Kathman and joining me is my good friend Richard Ballman. Richard, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good.
So, before you came into the show today, did you see any cool Pokemon out today?
Yeah, actually, I saw one of my favorite Pokemon. There was an Aggron just walking outside the building.
Wait, an Aggron?
Call someone about that.
Yeah,
actually.
That's not very safe. Like, those things are pretty dangerous.
I know, but they're still my favorite, so it was pretty cool.
Why is Aggron your favorite?
That giant steel dinosaur, what's not to love?
Fair enough. So...
It's got one of my favorite moves, too, Heavy Slam.
Alright. I'm afraid I'm not super familiar with Pokemon moves. What is that one again?
Heavy Slam, basically, the more your Pokemon weighs compared to the other Pokemon, the more damage it does. So
okay, so
a lot of people got their favorite really tiny but super strong Pokemon, but then you use Heavy Slam with Aggron, which is just one of the heaviest Pokemon, and it one-shots them all.
Yeah, I can easily imagine that working very well.
It's pretty efficient.
Yeah, well, we'll have to contact some people about the Aggron outside, but for now, let's just get into the show. So, basically what this whole show is about is because both of us, as you can imagine, are pretty big fans of Pokemon. I mean, that's why we're kind of doing this, but Pokemon has been like something that I would say is generational defining, I would even say, for people our age.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but at least when it comes to discussion, like, there's like talking about what your favorite Pokemon is, but there's also talking about the games and the card games even, and like even like the manga and stuff. Like, Pokemon as an entity is so expansive, and pretty much every single area of Pokemon has a gigantic bed of discussion behind it. But, I don't know, at least in my observations, it seems that one facet of Pokemon that doesn't seem to get a whole lot of discussion behind it is the Pokemon Anime. When most people talk about the Pokemon Anime, but a lot of people tend to dismiss the Pokemon Anime as, like, sort of a cash grab, like, just a bit of animation shovelware, which I think's a bit unfair. Like, what do you think, Richard?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people will basically just judge the anime based on Ash Ketchum himself. I know a lot of people, myself included, aren't a huge fan of him, and they take that to just mean that the anime itself isn't very good, which I don't think is true.
Yeah, I think that is a very fair assessment. And the overall goal of this show, at least, is so that we can sort of, like, bring a little bit more of discussion towards, like, each episode of the show and, like, really try to understand, like, what about it, like, we enjoy. Because there are problems with this show. Like, I would be lying if I said that there weren't any problems with it. But I think that in the span of this show being on air, I think that a lot of people have kind of lost sight with why it's pretty underrated. Because this is like one of the longest running television shows to ever be on air. It has been on consistently since 1997 and has never gotten off the air. Like, in terms of television standards, and especially children's television.
Yeah, the only show I can think of that I think has a longer running is South Park and The Simpsons.
And Sesame Street.
And Sesame Street. Well, I was going to say, but those two aren't children's shows.
Fair enough, yeah.
Sesame Street is.
Yeah. I feel like if this show really was as bad as people said it was, it probably wouldn't be on air as long as it was. That's what we hope to accomplish, is to try and understand and better explain why we have such a high affection for this show. And if you're listening at home, something that we encourage to do is that you try to watch these episodes before you listen to this, which, considering that we're going to be starting from the beginning, that's probably going to be very easy. Especially since the Pokemon Indigo League, the first season, you can get in a wide variety of ways. Not only are the first 52 episodes on Netflix, but you can also get them on Amazon Prime. And there's also a really, really sweet DVD set that you can buy of, like, the entire Indigo season for, like, I think it's like $25. If you're a fan of Pokemon, well within your ability to legally watch the show, because we cannot condone piracy in terms of watching these episodes.
Well...
Okay.
Yeah,
but I'm sorry. The radio managers at Goldenrod Radio are giving me a bit of a dirty look, so let's, we do not condone piracy. Anyway.
Whether or not we've done it ourselves is yet to be stated.
I have no comments. Moving on. So,
I've never pirated Pokemon, and that is a fact.
Alright, so, well, if we're going to get in...
fact.
Alright, well, if we're going to get into that, let's at least start off with our personal history with the franchise before we actually get into the show. So, Richard, what has been your sort of experience with Pokemon?
I don't remember if I played the game or watched the anime first. It was pretty much at the same time when I was young, but I watched a good amount of the anime, but I've definitely played a lot more of the games. And I did collect the cards when I was younger, but I stopped that pretty soon, and I never really actually played the card game, at least not until college. I was more of a Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game guy.
I was the one that showed you how to play, didn't I?
Yes, you were.
Yeah, alright. Well, my experience is probably a lot more atypical to other people my age, at least. I grew up in a house with a bunch of children, and because of that, the idea of getting a game console, and especially getting a game console in which there's only one save file, that is not going to be very manageable.
Yeah, you've got a lot of siblings.
Yeah, I mean, you've met my family, so
I've
you would know
one.
how that would go. Regardless, I religiously watched this show as a kid, and that's probably why I'm probably a bit more forgiving. It would be facetious to say that neither of us have an element of nostalgia behind this thing in terms of talking about it. But in terms of, my experience with Pokemon, it wasn't until I was much older that I was actually able to get into the games, and I was still able to really easily talk about and discuss and understand everything that was happening in this universe because of the Pokemon anime. And I think that this sort of leads to a bit of an underbelly with this show that I think is going to be both a really good benefit as well as being kind of the fatal flaw of this series. What I mean is that the Pokemon anime, at its base lowest level, despite the fact that there are a lot of really good stories and characters within this show, when they decided to make the anime, they made it with the goal of trying to teach unfamiliar people with the games the basic mechanics and world building and everything about the Pokemon world. The overall goal of the Pokemon anime is to make you understand everything that's happening in the games and the card games and all that stuff. That way you can better understand that. And I think that's going to play into a lot of some of the major problems people have, including Ash Ketchum.
Yeah, I think he's the major problem a lot of people have with
the
show.
There's a lot of discussion to be had about this husky 10-year-old, but
Husky.
Yeah, his husky voice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that might have been better phrased.
That did not sound right.
Yeah, once again, station management's giving me a bit of a side eye, but what I mean is that a lot of the problems that people have with Ash sort of stem with the fact that he's sort of meant to be this point of view character that's sort of meant to be an audience surrogate so that they can better understand everything that's happening in the world. I'll admit, it's a little frustrating sometimes to see Ash act in ways that might be seen as incompetent, but from a show design standpoint, it's meant so that, newcomers to the series can be sort of in the same position as Ash. That way, they can also have natural exposition on how things work being spewed to them. That way, they can better understand what's going on. Granted, as we get 300 episodes in,
Yeah.
it gets a bit...
At the beginning of this series, completely understandable, but when you're on episode 300 and he uses a water type to fight an electric type, you're just like, wait, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And he's all surprised, and he's like, how'd that happen? How do you think?
I will...
Pokemon Master?
Okay, well, I will fully disclose the fact right now that throughout this series, I fully anticipate being a bit of a devil's advocate for Ash, because maybe it's because I'm a little bit more forgiving because I am fully knowledgeable of the fact that why he might seem incompetent, but I also think that while he might seem adept when it comes to battling, there are a lot of really, really good moments with his character that I really like, and we'll be actually beginning to see some of those moments in the very first episode of this series, Pokemon I Choose You. But before we get into this episode, little bit of structuring things just to let you know how this is going to work. How we're going to try and do this is Richard's going to try and summarize this episode the best he can.
Not gonna be very good.
Well, don't tell them that.
I don't want to get their hopes up.
Okay, then.
I'm going to summarize it. That's a fact.
All right.
That's all there is to it.
There you go. And I'll interject with trivia and perhaps corrections so that we can provide a decent bevy of knowledge. Like I said, most of my experience with Pokemon is with the anime, so I suspect that I'll probably be a lot more knowledgeable about this than most people, because I'm one of the few people that has probably seen every single season of the show consistently. Full disclosure, I have not seen every single episode. I feel like there are very few people that can share that distinction, but I think I can hopefully bring a bit of wisdom to this. Just one other little note thing. In terms of our discussion and stuff, we're mainly going to be going off of the English dubbed versions of this. So, sorry, you won't be hearing much about Satoshi or discussions about the original Japanese stuff, because neither of us can speak Japanese, and neither of us really grew up on the Japanese sub, so, like, there's no real reason to do that, so...
We don't want to read subtitles.
Yeah, Richard, you might be a bit of a weeb compared to me, but...
Yeah, I think that's fair, probably. So I have watched anime where I've had to read subtitles. I'm not a big fan of it. I know there's people who will come at my throat for saying that, but it's like, I want to watch what's happening on screen while I hear it. I don't want to have to be reading as it's happening. Half the time I'll have to pause or something to read what is said, or I have to go back and see what happened while they said it. Now, there are some shows like One Punch Man where I've seen it enough times where I don't even need the subtitles there. I know exactly what's happening.
Yeah, sorry, otakus. We're going dubs on this one.
Dubs, not subs, motherfucker.
Alright, before we begin the recap, we would be woefully remiss if we did not mention any discussion towards what is the best theme song ever. Don't at me on this. The Pokemon theme song, next to, like, Pikachu and the Pokeball, I feel very comfortable in saying that for at least many people with our age and the nostalgia-minded.
Definitely not the best title for a theme song, though.
Yes, there is no title to this. It is simply called Pokemon Theme.
How creative.
Yeah, very creative, but it was written and performed by Jason Page, and I don't know, I feel like if you haven't listened to this song, first of all, hi, what's it been like living under the rock you've been? I hear...
Yeah, how you doing, Patrick?
Alright.
Lives under a rock.
Yeah, fair enough. I feel like, in terms of theme songs, like, for most TV shows, the goal of a theme song is to give you, like, the whole spirit of the show and getting you hyped up and excited for what's to be presented to you, and I think this theme song does an exceptional job at that. Like, the whole pathos of, like, I want to be the very best, and gotta catch 'em all. Like, that whole... It so easily summarizes everything that you're kind of, like, gonna be expecting from this series. Richard, do you have anything to add about this song?
It's a catchy song.
Yeah, it is a very catchy song. Like, I think that this is a very, very good theme song, and it's so simple, and honestly, there isn't a whole lot of depth to it, but, like, you know, it's got that warm, fuzzy, like, exciting feeling, and it's part of the reason why I like this show so much. But with over 15 minutes of us rambling about the show, just a couple of quick facts before we start. The first episode is Pokemon I Choose You. It was originally aired on April 1st, 1997 in Japan, and later aired on September 8th, 1998 in the USA. A full year after airing, it comes stateside. Pokemon I Choose You was written by a man named Takeshi Shudo, and this is probably someone that I'm going to be talking a lot about. But for those of you who don't know, Takeshi Shudo was the primary screenwriter in Pokemon in its very earliest seasons. Alongside being the screenwriter, he made a couple of Pokemon novelizations which helped to add some world building to the Pokemon world, which is where I'm going to get a lot trivia and facts and explanations for some of the things that we're going to be seeing in this show. We'll be definitely talking more about Shudo's work as it pops up more and more throughout the series, but I feel like like Shudo's a bit underappreciated because not a whole lot of people really know his work, but as I hope to display as we go on, a lot of his writing really does help to cement some of the really interesting aspects of the show, and I think is part of the reason why I think it's such a long-lasting piece of work. With all of that aside, let's finally get into Pokemon I Choose You.
So as the anime opens, we're treated to an 8-bit shot from the game of Gengar fighting Nidoran?
Nidoran.
Nidoran, okay.
And
I wasn't sure which one. I always get those two confused. It was the pink one.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
They're two of the best Pokemon from first gen, in my opinion.
Yeah. And
Because they're giant dinosaurs, you see a pattern with me.
Yes.
I like the giant dinosaur Pokemon.
You do love your dinos. In terms of like ways to open up this anime, I think this is like a really good appropriate way to do it. Because
yeah, I love it.
At least in Japan, when this thing first aired, Pokemon had already been on the Game Boy for about a year already. And it was very popular. So when people, I think it's a really cool idea to like start players off by immediately associating them with the game. That way, when it transitions the way it does, it sort of opens up a lot of the cool stuff that is sort of in store with the series. So what do they end up doing with this 8-bit intro?
Well, first I was going to say, that's also something unique to Pokemon that not any other card game anime could really do. I know Yu-Gi-Oh! Being the other probably Tycoon or Big Dog in the card game animes back then, they couldn't really do that because in the anime, it's still just a card game.
Yeah, but at least in Pokemon, it's like there's already an established world, and granted, we'll get into some of the illogical aspects of the show, but I think there's a lot more of a cohesive world in Pokemon compared to the rest of the monster catching games. And all that sort of stuff. But like this 8-bit introduction slowly transforms immediately from the 8-bit soundtrack and visuals to this vibrantly colored battle scene in which Gengar and Nidoran are fighting. And I'll let you take it from there.
So they fight for a bit, and then it kind of establishes that trainers can withdraw their Pokemon and send someone else out if they're not doing well by having them withdraw his Nidoran and sending out an Onix and continuing the fight. And then it pans out some more to reveal that you're not actually there in the stadium right now. That you're just in this 10-year-old boy's bedroom who's watching TV because he's going to get his Pokemon tomorrow and he's staying up way too late.
Yeah, just a little bit of trivia. With this battle between Nidoran and Gengar, when Nidoran is withdrawn, they don't show who the trainers are. You just see this muscly silhouette of someone, but people who are familiar with the games might notice that the mysterious muscled man that withdraws Nidoran is actually Bruno from the Elite Four, so people who are familiar with the Gen 1 games might recognize him. I think this first episode does a really good job at ushering in people who are fans of the games, while also being able to usher in people who aren't familiar with Pokemon.
And also kind of connecting both of the two universes together to say that they're kind of the same place.
Yeah, exactly. Like, when you see these black and white visuals, like, this is what's actually happening, and it sort of invites, it sort of goes on to help the games after the anime comes out, because instead of like seeing this very admittedly simple looking game, when you play Pokemon after watching this, you can more easily imagine what these battles might look like, and I think having this sort of combination of watching both the anime and playing the game really helps to enhance your experience with the world of Pokemon. And I think that's partially one of the biggest appeals to this. Just a little quick side note that I just realized. Before we started recording, I was actually looking into the history of anime adaptations of video games. According to at least Wikipedia, which I know, not the most accurate bit of sourcing, but before Pokemon, there were only like 5 or 6 actual long-running TV shows based off of video games. Like, apparently there was this Dragon Quest anime that was running through Japan that was pretty successful, also done by Toei Animation, who also did Dragon Ball Z. There was also a Mario anime movie, which is not good.
The better than the live action one?
That's a discussion for another day, but honestly, not really.
Kind of want to watch it now because I've seen the live action one more than one person reasonably should. I have it in my room. Why do I have it?
I don't know why you have that, but before Pokemon, any accurate adaptations of video games in movies and TV shows, they were a very rare occurrence. And on the higher end, you would get at least well-meaning stuff like the Super Mario Bros. Super Show and the Legend of Zelda cartoon. But on the low end, you get
Use me, princess.
I think not a lot of people really appreciate the fact that in terms of all the stuff that Pokemon does, I don't think enough people appreciate sort of how revolutionary Pokemon was in terms of video game adaptations, because before then, most people would just be here's a game story, just blab. Throughout the production of this TV show, I believe it was at Oda Studios. You might know them as also being the people who made the first Berserk anime, so that's a bit of a shift going from Berserk to Pokemon. But Oda Studios worked extremely closely with the producers at Game Freak in order to try and produce a very quality product, seeing that that they're accurately going to translate the world of the games into the world of the anime. Long-winded tangent aside, so we zoomed out and we come across that 10-year-old. None other than Ash Ketchum. We talked a bit about Ash before, but
he's immortal.
let's back up a bit before we get into that theory stuff. But Ash is getting ready. He's staying up super late because he's getting his Pokemon license tomorrow.
He never actually gets a license. I just like to point out, he just shows up.
That is very true.
There's no identification or any kind of...
Oh, well, actually, no.
Personal information.
No.
Oh, wait, the Pokédex.
Yeah, I was about to say. The Pokédex,
shit.
yeah.
I answered my own question.
There you go. But yeah.
You, Pokemon.
There you go. Well,
won't happen again.
Yeah. Oh,
It will.
Yeah. Don't count your Pidgeys before they hatch. Okay, that was a dumb statement. Whatever. Moving on. But they explain that every year, 10-year-olds get to journey out into the world of Pokemon to get
safe.
Super safe.
He almost dies episode 1.
Little quick fun fact. Most people tend to be all oh, you're sending 10 years olds out. Why don't they go to school? There's actually an in-world answer for that.
Yeah, because I asked him about that before we started recording. It was actually a really interesting answer to it. I mean, they're still sending 10-year-olds out to almost die, or possibly do die. We just don't see it.
Yeah, but a little explanation. So, Takeshi Shudo, the guy I previously mentioned as the screenwriter, he also wrote a couple of novelizations of Pokemon before the anime was released. And in the novelizations, these are only exclusive to Japan, but at least in the novelizations, they explain that in the world of Pokemon, when a kid turns 10 years old, they have the option to take a year off of school and go on their Pokemon journey. With the expectation being that a majority of Pokemon trainers tend to kind of quit their journeys a month or two in, because not a whole lot of people actually tend to find success as Pokemon trainers. We don't really get to see that side of that in the series, but they explain that most aspiring Pokemon trainers are trying to compete to be the Pokemon champion and beat all the Pokemon gyms and compete in the Pokemon League. The reason being is that, according to at least Shudo's novelization, being Pokemon champion is akin to winning the lottery. If you're Pokemon champion, you're kind of set for life. So a lot of kids kind of leave home for a while with the aspirations of being the exception to that. But like the lottery, a lot of people will compete, but few people actually tend to succeed in it. So there's a little bit of an explanation for what they're doing. But Ash swears to the television that he is going to capture every single Pokemon and be a Pokemon master. He's gonna do that a lot. He's gonna he
swears every episode.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, the potty mouth on that Ketchum boy, but he makes an oath that he will be a Pokemon master, sort of reaffirming.
This is not Naruto. believe it. Every episode.
At least with this, it's sort of meant to reinforce the whole gotta catch 'em all tagline of the series. But in the middle of his first of many monologues, he's interrupted by
his mom. And she tells him he's gotta go to bed. And he's like, I can't sleep. So then she's like, instead of being like, well, I'm your mom, go to bed, she's like, well, I guess I tried. Here, watch something educational then, because that'll fix it. And then she just leaves him. And then he stays up, God knows how long. Watching apparently a local broadcast, since it's literally Professor Oak just going over the 3 starters. And then he falls asleep and somehow destroys... Oh yeah, he destroys it because he thinks it's a Pokeball. Destroys it at the alarm clock.
Let me stop you there, because there is a little bit of an interesting thing about Ash's dream sequence. So, yeah, Ash goes to bed super late, but during
Professor Ash goes to bed super late?
Alright, yeah.
We got a lot of qualifications for a 10-year-old.
Slip of the lick-a-tongue. Okay.
He's gonna make bad puns and I'm gonna stare at him until he goes, okay.
But an interesting thing about his whole dream sequence, like, remember how I said that this show is meant to be sort of an educational tool to people who aren't familiar with the games?
Mm-hmm. He mentions that Bulbasaur is the best for newbies.
Yeah. And he says, for expert trainers, Charmander is the way to go. It's sort of like subtly alluding to the fact that, at least in Gen 1, the starter that you choose is a subtle difficulty meter in which you can determine how easy your progression in terms of beating the gym leaders is going to be. Because, like, with Bulbasaur, as a grass type, you can easily beat the first 3 gyms quite easily, but grass is a very common type, especially in the early game. Squirtle is more of a medium difficulty, in which you only really get advantage with Brock for the first gym, but as with Bulbasaur, like, water types are very abundant, especially in the later game. And Charmander...
the best one.
We'll get into the grand old starter debate, but...
Well, listen, he's the most dinosaur starter, so of course I love him.
Yeah, but Charmander is the hard mode in terms of which starter you choose, because... Charmander has disadvantage on, like, the first 2 gyms, and meaning that you have to spend more time trying to catch other Pokemon. I mean, most of the Pokemon games, people tend to accuse them of being a little too easy, but I do think that it's partially attributed to the fact that they do have sort of this dynamic difficulty at the very beginning, and I think it's a little nice, cool, subtle thing that they were able to allude to that, so... But yeah... He has his Pokemon dream, and then
he oversleeps, and he runs to the professor's place in his pajamas.
So, a couple interesting things that happen on his way there. You see a Dodrio, the evolution of Doodoo, crowing like a rooster. At least in these first couple of episodes, they're going to do a whole lot of exposition in terms of, like, hey, check out this Pokemon in the background doing their thing. I think that's a pretty... cool, decent way to show, like, hey, there's a whole lot of these cool different creatures. But, yep, Ash is running late.
And then when he gets there, all the Pokemon are gone, but...
Before then, he has a very special encounter before he enters the lab.
Oh, right. He runs into Gary, the 10-year-old with a fan club and a chauffeur and also apparently a driver's license.
Yep, Gary Oak is the...
Gary motherfucking Oak.
Gary is...
Mr. Gary. Show him some respect. That's what he says in the episode.
He does insist on Mr. Gary, even though it should technically be Mr. Oak, but whatever, Gary. You do you. I didn't tell you this before we started to record, but there's also a little novelization explanation for the cheerleaders and the chauffeur.
Oh, God.
Yeah, so...
Are they pedophiles? Because I think they're pedophiles. So we don't know how old they are, and they're all following around a 10-year-old kid and going, yeah, Gary Oak.
Yeah,
he's our man.
Yeah.
Do it, no one can.
The cheerleaders is admittedly a bit strange, but at least according to the novelizations, again, written by Takeshi Shudo, the logic being is that there are very, very few Pokemon trainers that succeed. And there's a bit of a town legend in Pallet Town, where it is said that Gary Oak's great-great-grandfather was a Pokemon champion, and like one of the few people to win the league. And because of that, the Oak family sort of has a bit of a legacy name. So when Gary's acting like the pompous jerk and with his Corvette and his enclave of cheerleaders, that's sort of like that old money influence where people are just like, yeah, the Oaks, they're super cool because they, I guess, made Pallet a name. Which just occurs to me that before Gary leaves, he swears that I'm going to be a Pokemon master and put this town on the map. Even though theoretically, Professor Oak is like the most famous Pokemon professor. Like, I'm fairly certain Pallet's pretty famous, but alright, good to have goals, Gary, I guess. Good to be ambitious. But
maybe be less of a douche about it, but
yeah, he could definitely be. But I think Gary presents a very nice antagonistic characterization that will definitely become very entertaining as the series goes on. I think it was a bit of a stroke of genius to make the rival as hateable as Gary.
Because everyone wants to see Gary get his ass kicked.
Yeah.
Because he's a douche.
Yeah. Gary needs to have a bit of a lesson taught to him, so I think that goes on to be a good motivating factor throughout the series. But Gary rushes off.
And then Ash goes inside to go get his Pokemon, and his first one, I believe he chooses Bulbasaur, and it's empty.
Yep.
And then he chooses Squirtle, and it's empty. And then he chooses Charmander. Don't know why it took him this long to get to the best one, but... And then it's empty. So, even if he had got there on time, someone in the town would have still been shit out of luck and not have gotten a Pokemon.
Yeah, because Professor Oak comes out and chastises him for, like, sleeping in late. And
lets him open all the Pokeballs and be like, someone already got that one, someone already got that one. And also, you're a professor and this is your job to give them their starting Pokemon. Why do you only have one of each of the starter Pokemon? Shouldn't you have, like, 10 of each or something just in case? How small is this town?
I mean, Pallet is theoretically a small town, but I highly doubt that they would have, like, opened up a public broadcast about Pokemon class, like, late at night, if it turned out there were only 4 Pokemon trainers in town. Like, it seems like they sort of overlooked that fact, Jex.
Or maybe Professor Oak and Gary just aren't all that different, and Oak is just as big of a douche, but a lot more subtle about it.
To be fair to Oak, once all of the Pokemon are gone, he does give him another option.
Yeah, he's like, hey, you want this shit rat I got in the back?
Okay, Pikachu!
That's how he basically... I'm not saying Pikachu's a shit rat, I'm just saying that's how he basically expresses it. He's like, this Pokemon's not very good.
Yeah, that does
Especially for a starter. Here you go, kid. Knock yourself out.
It does seem like a very interesting way to introduce the mascot of your series, to portray him as something subpar to the original 3 starters. But yeah, he lets out Pikachu, and I will say, fans of the Pokemon movies might know that in a future Pokemon feature film, there is a bit of a weird time paradox in which there might be some sort of predestination going on with Pikachu and Ash and their relationship, but that's a bit of a can of worms that we'll get into another time. But
that's a paradox.
I mean, when you're dealing with time travel, paradoxes are
inevitable.
Yeah. What's also inevitable was as soon as Pikachu comes out, there is his signature Thunderbolt attack on Ash.
Which in reality would have some serious health problems for him later in life.
Yes. At least
tasers aren't safe.
You speak as if you have experience with that.
I don't. I just know that they're not safe. You can't just get zapped by electricity and go, oh, that was shocking. No,
yeah.
It's dangerous. It can kill you.
Part of the reason why I think I also might be a bit more forgiving about this show is because you will find no shortage of electricity-based puns, especially when dealing with Pikachu. That wasn't even intended. All right, I'm on a roll today. But after Ash gets his Pikachu and experiences a terrible shock, he experiences another form of shock when he goes outside.
His mom is there. The only people in the town who, I guess, aren't pedophiles, following Gary Oak around.
Yeah.
And she embarrasses him, as moms do to their 10-year-old boys. And gives him a bunch of stuff and is like, hey, don't forget to change your underwear.
Credit where credit's due. If my mom had to experience, like, me leaving home to go on a journey, she might, like, just rub it in a little, like, oh, I'll just be so lonely. I love you, Mom. I'm no disrespect, but Delilah Catcham does not, like, guilt trip, because she knows that this is what he wants, and this is something that she respects him going out in the world and doing his thing.
And then Pikachu tries to murder everybody.
True. Just a little quick question. Hey, Delilah Catcham, I know I just gave you a bunch of praise earlier for being supportive of your son and all that, but why didn't you wake him up?
Good question. I don't know. Does she have a job? Maybe she had to leave and only had time to come back.
She might have been spending her morning gathering up friends and family to prepare his little going away thing, so
yeah.
She might have just anticipated, like, he'll probably, like, wake up super early because he's so excited for this. So yeah, I don't think she would have anticipated the breaking of that Pokeball-shaped alarm clock. Which, hey, by the way, Nintendo, why isn't that a thing?
Yeah,
like,
that's a merchandising gold right
yeah,
there,
like,
especially when that episode first aired.
Oh yeah, like, I'm surprised, like, we didn't see a bunch of those things lining, like, a Toys R Us in the 90s. Like, seems like a pretty good bit of merchandising, but
Maybe Delilah Catcham also wasn't super concerned if he didn't get a Pokemon, because maybe she would have said, okay, well, take Mr. Mime with you.
No, Mr. Mime didn't show up until much later in the series.
Oh, well.
Although you do bring...
Never mind, she's a bad mother then.
Well, no, it might have been. Maybe she was subconsciously like, oh, if he doesn't get a Pokemon, he won't have to leave home. Which...
That bitch! No.
I mean... Obviously, we might be reading a bit much into her motivations and stuff.
Let's be honest, probably just poor planning on the writer's part.
What are you gonna do?
Are we supposed to think that Mr. Mime's been there the whole time, or does he just show up in a later episode? I don't remember.
He does show up in a later episode, which will... I believe it's episode... Oh, gosh. It's when they're on their way back from the Cinnabar Islands. Yeah, so it's going to be much, much later, but...
Mr. Mime is Ash's dad. That's another theory.
We'll get into theories, believe me, but Ash gets happy travels from people at Pallet Town, and his mom lets out the first of many, don't forget clean underwear!
Well, you don't want to forget clean underwear, alright? You're gonna get a rash or something, it's just not gonna be fun. So she's not wrong. Maybe don't say that in front of a bunch of other people, but...
Yeah, that's... Oh god, I'm picturing all the worst kinds of rashes and gross stuff that I did not...
That could happen.
I did not need to think about when discussing it.
Everybody, don't forget clean underwear, alright?
Very good.
If you don't have any clean underwear, just don't wear dirty underwear. Just go commando for the day, alright? It's gonna be safer than wearing dirty underwear.
Sagely advice from Richard Ballman over here.
You can turn it around.
Okay, we are moving on.
You can laugh longer than
all right,
a
day. But Ash is also moving on as he leaves town with Pikachu tied to a rope and wearing the rubber gloves that his mom gave him.
That he immediately throws away because he's like, maybe you'll like me more now.
I mean...
You get the gesture, but at the same time, this is an electric mouse that wants to kill you.
Yeah, but I think that's one of the things I really like about Ash. Like, he does constantly talk about, like, I'm going to be the very best and catch them all, and I'm going to be a Pokemon master, but, like, that's definitely a goal for him. But when watching this show, and definitely in later episodes, the main impression with Ash I get is that his goal, at least as a Pokemon trainer, is to try and make as many Pokemon friends as he can. Like, he really, really cares about his other Pokemon compared to other trainers and even players of the games. I feel like Ash takes a very altruistic methodology in terms of how he chooses to be a Pokemon.
He's an animal lover.
Yeah. I mean, I can identify. I can relate. But he tries to extend the gesture. But during all this, Pikachu's a jerk. Like, I feel like the grand thesis for, like, these early set of episodes is everyone is a jerk to Ash.
Yeah, everyone except his mom seems to be the only one who's not a total prick to him.
Yeah, it seems like part of it is because, like, Ash can be a bit brash and, like, a little full of himself sometimes, so you kind of do need that little dosage of reality. But I do think, like, people just constantly rail on this poor kid, like, oh, I'm sorry, Professor Oak, I slept in. You don't need to, like, rub it in. I feel like the fact that I might not get a Pokemon is punishment enough. Jeez Louise. It also doesn't really explain why Pikachu is such a jerk. Like, look, Pikachu, I get it. You're stubborn. You don't want to be in the ball. But, like...
Pikachu acts more like a cat than a mouse.
Yeah,
at least... his own personality and just decides off the bat, I don't like you until you, like, sacrifice enough for me. Then I'll be okay with you for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, hey, Pikachu, you know... You probably wouldn't have been in danger in the first place if you had helped Ash out earlier. Specifically, when they encounter their first Pokemon.
Oh, yeah. Ash, first of all, he's been training his whole life to catch a Pokemon, but instead of trying to weaken it, before he even asked Pikachu...
What's the Pokemon that he encounters?
Oh, a Pidgey.
Yep.
Of course. Before he even, like, asks Pikachu for help or anything, he just throws a Pokeball at it, Pokemon Go style, and it gets away, and then I believe this Pokedex...
to be fair, like, this is Route 1 we're talking, and, like, these things are, like, at least, like, in game terms, like, probably, like, level 3 to 5. Like, you can catch a Pokemon with just, like, at full health with a Pokeball. It's low chance, but...
Yes, but then his Pokédex tells him he needs to weaken it, and he says, oh, now you tell me. So now we know he didn't think that beforehand. We know he just was ignorant to it. Even though he's been training it his whole life.
Yeah, even though he's been training. Yeah,
given his whole life has been about 10 years long, and probably only been training for 4 years.
Yeah. I mean...
he was able to even start, but still, you feel like that's Pokemon 101.
Yeah, it is a bit Pokemon 101, and...
So then
I get it, it's like the writers trying to naturally integrate exposition on, like, how the basic mechanics work. Like I said, trying to make it so that people who aren't familiar with the games understand what's going on. But I feel like there was probably a better way to portray this without making Ash look incompetent. But then again, it might not be as humorous to watch. But because what immediately happens after he tries to catch Pidgey?
He decides to improvise, adapt, and overcome, so he resorts to animal cruelty and starts just chucking rocks at him.
Yeah, well,
that'll work out, right?
Perfectly good. He also tries to bag him with his PJs.
He tries to smother him to death.
Which, didn't his mom give him, like, something like akin to a tablecloth? Like, he has a sack.
Yeah, no, he definitely does.
Like, he had something bigger than a shirt that he could have contained this Pidgey in.
I think by episode 1 we've learned that Ash is not a smart man. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that.
I mean, I might argue with that. Like, I say he's inexperienced, but, like, let's not...
Street smart. He is not a street smart man.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So, he tries to smother him to death. That doesn't work. He gets hit by...
I don't think he was trying to smother him.
Well, what was he trying to accomplish then?
Well, now that you mention it...
Just hold it in the bag? He's just going to struggle till it gets away unless he suffocates it.
I'm now just imagining, like, Ash holding this bag and just, like, punching the thing in it until it's unconscious. Oh my god!
Dead Pidgey. He's like, I got it! He runs into Gary again. It's like, let's battle. He throws out a dead bird.
Oh no!
Use sand attack.
Well, he does. Well, speaking of sand attack, that
he uses gust. I mean, the Pidgey uses gust to escape, and then uses sand attack to blind them to get away.
Oh my god!
After that, that's when he's like, "All right, I'll just knock him right out." And he starts chucking rocks at him.
I mean, that is a viable strategy in the Safari Zone, at least.
Which is still fucked up.
Yeah. God, now that you mention that possibility, I'm almost glad that Pidgey got away.
Oh yeah, Lord. No, he was gonna murder the thing.
Oh Lord Arceus, jeez. Oh God, but yeah, I'm sorry.
No.
Continue.
And he sees one in the distance, and he throws a rock at it. But lo and behold, it's not a Pidgey, it's a Sparrow.
Yep.
Which is a lot meaner than a Pidgey.
A lot meaner. I was always someone who preferred Pidgey in terms
of Sparrow.
Alright, well, guess that should tell you about our personalities. Is it because Fiora reminds you of like a pterodactyl or something like that?
Oh, yeah, it's a big-ass bird. It's gonna fuck you up.
There you go. Well, we'll get into that because props to Ash, like, that was a very good throw that he did.
Oh,
like,
yeah, he clocks him.
Yeah, it clocks him hard, like, causes a giant boil to show up on the head. Like, I'm surprised that thing isn't gonna have, like, a concussion later, like...
It might have died later.
No, because,
Oh.
we'll get into that later.
Spoilers.
Spoilers, yes. Or, better yet, Pokemon hype. But he clocks this thing, which, probably not the best idea, because...
Then it tries to murder him.
Oh, yeah.
And then it goes for Pikachu.
And
he's like, what are you doing that for? And the Pokedex is like, oh, they're jealous of trained Pokemon for some reason.
well, I think that's meant to sort of like, it's sort of meant to justify the prospect of capturing Pokemon because like, listen, it's one of the like earliest hot takes most people end up making on the internet when they're younger is like, oh, Pokemon's about animal abuse. Like,
shut up, Peter.
Next to Belle from Beauty and the Beast having Stockholm Syndrome, it's probably the least original hot take you can have about, like, a piece of media.
Pretty sure she's just a furry.
That's a show for another day, but at least in terms of the games and the show, they try to make an effort to, like, point out that, like, Pokemon inherently desire being trained because as sort of like an adaptive tactic, like if we were to contextualize this in terms of like Darwinian evolution, being trained gives you the increased chance of being stronger and being able to learn moves and take up forms that you wouldn't know if you were in the wild.
Almost say it's pretty similar to how dogs are for us today because we bred them to basically want to be companions with us because they're more likely to survive a lot longer if they live with humans.
Let's be honest, I mean, there are a bunch of things with the Pokemon world that seem a bit off, but I feel like too many people like to riff on this thing because of, like, basic world-building conventions. Like, I don't know, I mean, the internet's gonna internet, so... But yeah.
It's just a show, man. Like, hey, see, they like it. Shut up.
Yeah, I mean...
Enjoy the show, goddammit.
Yeah, you aren't gonna be seeing a whole lot of, oh, why are they being so cruel to these animal takes on this show? Because, like, it's not exactly a very deep well of discussion. Where were we now? The Spearow...
Spearows, he texts Pikachu, and he's like, why are you doing that? And Pokedex says, oh, the jealous.
Yep.
And then it flies back and gets its family. Or I think Pikachu fights it.
Yeah, Pikachu shocks it, delivers a shocking defeat.
Yep.
That one wasn't as good. I promise to try and do better.
Pikachu's just like, the fuck you think? Fuck you think you're doing?
Yeah.
And I was like, god damn it. And it's like, Mom! And goes and gets its family.
Yep.
And then they come and like, now we're all gonna beat you up.
Oh yeah, I mean, you do not want to mess with Spearow, because those things, like, as soon as they're chasing him, they're, like, pecking at this thing, and you see, like, cuts and bruises on the thing, and it's just like...
Oh, yeah.
Like, they probably would be...
It's murder in town.
Oh, yeah, they would not have a problem with just, like, killing that Pikachu in cold blood, which, honestly, you would think that Spearow would be kind of used to it? I don't know, maybe it's a testament to what kind of jerks they can be. Interesting thing, as Ash and Pikachu are running away... I talked a little bit earlier about how we get to see a lot of glimpses of, like, Pokemon casually existing in this world, and while they're in the tall grass, they run past a bunch of Sandshrew, they run past a bunch of Mankey. Also, we didn't really mention this earlier, but there was a little quick scene in which a Rattata tries to steal Ash's food, but...
Oh, yeah.
But, I mean, that was mainly just to establish more Pokemon.
And to call Ash stupid one more time by the Pokedex.
Oh yeah, because the show is going to definitely love doing that. But interesting little bit of trivia in this. I mean, it is the first episode, but in the entire span of the show, the very first episode has the most first-time appearances of Pokemon. For the first time, we see 16 total Pokemon being introduced to us, which, I mean, it makes sense. Like, this is the first episode of the series, so they're going to put a lot of effort into implementing world building and showing, like, oh, look at all these cool creatures that you might encounter later. Like, I think it's a pretty good bit of setup for future episodes and stuff like that. But they're running past a bunch of Mankey and Sandshrews. Then they come at a bit of an obstacle.
Yeah, it's a fucking cliff. So he does what any sensible human would do, and he jumps right the fuck off it.
I mean...
Which should kill him.
Well, no, he lands in water. Okay.
That does not matter.
That's true, yeah.
If you're that hot,
Water...
I mean, even if he survived, he should be seriously injured.
Yeah, that's... I will say, I mean, he's in a bit of a desperate situation.
He's in a pickle.
Yeah. So, like, I feel like pretty good decision in terms of, like, trying to get out of danger, because...
I mean, it's not like they can fly at him or anything.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the waters are also pretty dangerous, because...
That was me saying they 100% can fly at him because they're a flying Pokemon.
Yeah.
I want to make that clear because you just agreed with me and kept going.
They're birds, so that's...
They can fly.
They can fly.
It is not the best decision he could have made there.
Yeah, that's fair.
He could have just went any other direction.
Yeah. Like, at least with the water thing, like, that would provide a bit of cover and they wouldn't be able to see him as they're swimming away.
Yeah.
Although the water...
there's still a lot of birds dive into the water to get food. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit of an interesting thing. So, I suppose the closest analog to an actual bird, a spear would either be I mean, Pidgeys are meant to be sparrows and stuff, which is a bit ironic name-wise, but... Yeah, Pidgeys are meant to be, like, crosses between pigeons and sparrows, whereas Spearows seem to be more parrot-like, oddly enough. Like...
Really?
Like they... At least when I look at a Spearow, they seem to resemble a cross between a crow and a parrot, like, with their hooked bills and, like, their pack-like mentality and their highly intelligent and territorial nature. Like, those match the traits of parrots and crows very well. If you guys know anything about, like, birds and stuff like that.
Not really, so I'll take your word for it.
Fair enough.
Parrots are colorful and they want crackers.
I mean, it's a bit more complicated than that, but both
That's
of those...
what I know.
But both of those bird species...
crows are awesome.
Crows are awesome, but they aren't known for diving. They can swim, but they don't really dive a whole lot, which might be a good way to, like, lose their scent a bit. Although, the water does prove a bit dangerous, because they run into a Gyarados in the water.
Yeah, no, that thing will eat them whole, because that's akin to, like, a fucking Megalodon shark.
Yeah. I mean, it seems very strange that they want to set up what sort of Pokemon that they want.
You could have done the other smaller fish Pokemon.
Yeah, fish.
Magikarp, fucking Goldeen.
I feel like a Sea King would have been a more natural enemy, because, like, it's a little lower level, but Sea Kings can also be extremely dangerous. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they're swimming through water, craftfully dodging a Gyarados.
And then they get pulled out of the water by none other than fan favorite or fan unfavorite, depending how you look at it, I guess. Misty.
I will say right now,
I like Misty.
Yeah, who's saying they ain't a fan of Misty? Because
I'm sure a lot of people that think she's just a naggy bitch.
I feel like that's just attributed to the fact that I'll say a lot of praises to the writing team and people who run the show, but I do think that they have a bit of a lackluster approach to writing female characters, at least. Like, Misty, I really, really like Misty, and I will be one to admit that when I was younger and it was announced that Misty would be leaving, I may or may not have cried.
Oh, yeah, no, I was upset whenever I heard that they were all splitting up.
Yeah, in my defense...
Like, what? Well, rest in peace, Pokemon. Is what I thought. I was like, you can't do that.
Well, I did.
Because I did end up doing that before.
Yeah, I did end up. I mean, I still watched the series after that, but that's eons into the future from now. But as for this first encounter with Misty, what were your thoughts?
Pretty similar, I guess, to the people who are like, wow, what a bitch.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, are you okay? It's like, I'm fine. Not you, the rat.
Interesting little note. So I know I said we weren't going to talk a whole lot about the Japanese versions of that, but this is just like a little bit of trivia. In the original Japanese versions, when Misty asks, "Are you okay?" and Ash says, "I'm fine," when she says, "Not you," she actually slaps him, which is why when you see the shot of her hand is sort of raised.
Oh.
But
I did not know that.
When they were localizing it for the United States, they did a freeze frame of it in which when she says "not you," it Ash's face sort of freezes a bit, and then they cut. It's like a very, very small change, but I think it does help to make Misty seem a little less aggressive and mean, because, hey, you don't know what this kid's been through. Like,
yeah.
maybe lay
He
off.
literally just fished him out of a lake. He almost died.
Yeah.
A couple times.
Yeah.
One was his own doing, the other not really.
I will be one to say that Misty is one of my favorite characters, and this is one of those examples where once they sort of get past this whole, like, very naggy introduction to her character, I feel like she gets really, really fun, and I think she ends up having a really good, like, bit of chemistry and banter with Ash.
I think she's got the best backstory.
Yeah.
All of them, too.
Yeah.
Just the fact that all of her sisters aren't, like, leaders of the gym.
We'll have plenty to discuss about
She's
Misty.
a tomboy one. It's like, I don't care about being pretty.
We'll definitely get into more of that as time goes on, because as soon as Misty helps him out, she points his way to the Pokemon Center, which I don't know why they don't call it a Pokemon hospital. Like, I mean, I guess it's the pilot, so they gotta...
They want people to know.
Like, they want to know what a Pokemon Center is, so, like... But Ash's gotta book it, because out in the distance, giant swarm of those Spearows right after his butt. Like,
oh, yeah.
It's kind of impressive that they were able to track him the way they were, but...
He ain't losing them.
Yeah, well, he's gotta get away somehow.
So he steals her bike.
Yep.
The infamous, I'm just borrowing it, I'll bring it back, I promise. Which for the longest time was a big joke. It's like, yo, and he never did.
Well,
but then he eventually did, but I think it's only because people complained about it so much that they were just like, okay, fine, here's the bike back.
Funnily enough,
shut up about it.
Funnily enough, bike destruction is a bit of a trope throughout this series. And again, this is like eons in the future, but for some reason, despite the fact that the bike is a very key item in the game, they don't really take advantage of bikes enough in this, but...
So anyways, he makes it a couple feet and then face plants, because he can't ride a bike apparently.
Well, I mean, he goes off a cliff. It's starting to rain, and like, the terrain's getting watery. Like, have you ever tried riding a bike in the rain?
Yes.
Okay. Like, you know how hard it can be.
I've fallen off bikes, I get it.
But
still.
It's
like, I could steal your bike, and then you feel like she could probably still see him. Just blat. It's like, okay.
Yeah. But it does seem like a pretty easy all is lost moment as Ash and Pikachu are sitting bruised and cut on the ground as the giant swarm comes at them.
And you know what that means? Monologue time.
Yep. Ash is like, Pikachu, get in the ball. And honestly, I think this next moment where Ash shields himself for Pikachu and declares to the Spearow, I don't care if you're kicking my butt right now. I'm going to defeat all of you guys. Like, I don't know. As a kid, yeah, there was a lot about Ash Ketchum that frustrated me, and there is still a lot that frustrates me, but the earnestness and his willingness to put himself over others, like, I think that really, really is an admirable quality about him. Like, that sort of drive he has to, like, try to be his best despite everyone constantly shitting on him, like, that sort of, like, attitude is, like, I don't know, it's something that I always strive to have. Like, it's something that I really admired in him. Although, I do call into question, like, what would have happened if Pikachu hadn't intervened?
Oh, yeah, no, he would have died.
But luckily, that's not the case.
Luckily,
because
Pikachu's like, I'm inspired. It's Super Saiyan time.
Oh, yes, as Pikachu triumphantly jumps in the air and delivers a devastating thunderbolt to all of them.
We've been like, oh, couldn't have done that earlier?
Well,
That's cool.
I mean, I think it was also...
all I had to do was give a big dramatic speech and then you take care of the problem, Pikachu.
Yeah, well, I think it's...
I almost died.
Well, I think it's partially attributed to the fact that, like, yeah, Pikachu's a bit of a jerk, but he's
a total douche.
Yeah, I think the reason why Pikachu is such a jerk at the beginning, at least, is because, as displayed by the fact that he's able to take down, like, over 30 Spearow with, like, one Thunderbolt. Granted, he had the assistance of a Thunderstorm, but it was still, like, pretty powerful. I think the reason why he was such a jerk is because he probably thought he was above all of that, because, like, this Pikachu, Ash's Pikachu, is, like, most people say that he is the most powerful Pikachu ever. And I think, like, the fact that Pikachu might have been aware of that before being taken in by Professor Oak, and he was probably thinking, like, I'm too good for this. Like, I don't have to listen to you. I'm already powerful. So that might be a bit of an explanation for why Pikachu is the way that he is. Yeah, I don't know. I think this was a really, really cool moment. And I think it's also assisted by the music that they had playing in the background. It's a track called Tears in the Rain. One of the unfortunate parts about this dub, again, this is probably going to be like one of the last times I mentioned the Japanese version, but in the original Japanese version, they had a lot more songs than the American version for some reason. It might have been because of, like, syncing dialogue with it or something, but I don't know. But Tears in the Rain is one of the few original Japanese songs that was imported into the English version. And just a little quick minor note that I'm definitely going to be talking about more in the future is that the music of this show is phenomenal. Like, the arranger and composer of the Pokemon anime, in terms of his score, is a man named Shinji Miyazaki, and he continues to be the main composer of all the music in this. And I feel like, especially since the only reference we had for the music was, like, the 8-bit, like, hearing this amazing orchestra with, like, guitar and synths in it is, like, I feel like that's a really amazing translation from the games to this anime. It, like, really, really, in my mind, helped to, like, make this a more epic experience. Like, what do you think of the music of this show?
That is definitely some of the most iconic music of our generation. I think everyone, even people who don't like Pokemon, know the Pokemon theme song.
I mean, it's not just the theme song, but also, like, the background music, like, during, like, the Pokemon battles and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, Shinji Miyazaki didn't really have a hand in the theme song, at least. That was all Jason Page, but I do think, even though not a whole lot of people have listened to these tracks on their own outside of the TV show, but I feel like most people, when re-listening to these, there's going to be at least some emotion that will well up inside. Like, I defy anyone to, like, listen to, for example, this song, Tears in the Rain, without feeling just a little bit of something. You know, melt your cold ice hearts. Yeah, enough me rambling about music and stuff like that. So, Pikachu kicks a bunch of butt.
And then the storm magically goes away. Get a rainbow, and then we see a mysterious bird fly across the sky.
Yes.
And then Ash becomes immortal.
Okay, well, I feel like this is as good.
That's where the first big Pokemon theory starts.
Well, I mean, we might as well start getting into a couple of the theories people have about the show. Oddly enough, there are a bunch that pop up in this very first episode. So, like you said, Ho-Oh flies across the sky as soon as the storm subsides. According to one of the Pokedex entries, it said that if a traveler sees Ho-Oh in the sky, they are granted a wish, and many people theorize that.
I think it's that they get eternal happiness.
Yes.
And so for Ash, eternal happiness for him was to be on his Pokemon journey indefinitely.
So, like, we're going to definitely get into the whole how old is Ash discussion, but most people tend to think, like, oh, because of Ho-Oh, he's still 10 years old.
The only problem with that theory though, is that no one else seems to question it. Like, these other people wouldn't be affected by it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what the fuck are you still 10?
I mean, we might as well get into the other theory about why Ash is still 10, and there is the infamous Ash is in a coma theory.
Oh god, yeah.
Which I'm assuming
Those theories suck. Be more creative.
Yeah, I'm sorry, internet edgelords, but neither of us are super interested in the whole Ash is in a coma.
It was a dream the whole time.
Yeah, because it doesn't really... Okay.
It's just a deus ex machina to explain things. It's not an interesting theory.
Exactly. Like, especially from a storytelling standpoint, it doesn't really add anything. This is what we in the creative writing business would call...
bullshit.
Yeah, that's true, but to put it more academically, it would be considered poor setup, because if that's the case, it would never be called back again, and it's never something that is built up, because when you're writing something, it's about providing information and letting your audience be able to understand the world without surprising them. If you're gonna give them a twist, you need to make it not just appear out of the blue, because that's not satisfying, and it doesn't make your audience feel super smart by having the rug pulled under them. It just feels like a dumb prank.
It's just well, fuck you too then.
Yeah,
goddamn.
Pretty much, but there's that theory. A third theory, this isn't related to Ash at all, but it's related to Pikachu. Throughout the series, we are going to be seeing Pikachu perform amazing feats. Like I said before, Pikachu is exceptionally powerful compared to other Pikachus. And a lot of people attribute this to the fact that Pikachu was able to easily destroy over these 30 Spearows. And for any of you super in-depth hardcore trainers, you might know of a concept called EVs and IVs, which are subtle statuses that can increase depending on which Pokemon you battle and stuff like that. Do you have much experience with EVs and IVs?
God, no. I tried at one point, but I was just like, oh god, this just isn't fun. I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, no disrespect to you Poképros out there, but yeah, I'm sorry. I can't...
prefer to enjoy the game.
Oh, shots fired there, But for those of you who aren't familiar, like I said before, depending on which Pokemon you defeat, it can subtly increase certain statuses within your Pokemon. So, be it your attack, your defense, speed, and whatnot. Players might know that if you defeat a Spearow, some of the traits that it increase upon defeat is speed. And people suspect that because Pikachu defeated so many Spearow at what seems to be a very low level at this point, like, if we were to quantify how strong he was, I would say, like, probably, like, level 5 to 7, something early game like that.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but at such a low level, defeating so many Pokemon would have dramatically increased Pikachu's speed and given him a bit of a power boost. And as we'll see throughout the series, a lot of the reason why Pikachu is so powerful is because he has a lot of a speedy advantage during battles. And a lot of people attribute that to the fact that he defeated those Spearows. I actually kind of like this idea, because not only does it reward Pikachu for acting selflessly like Ash does, but it also, like, seems to provide, like, some explanation for why Pikachu is more powerful, and, like, I think that's a pretty satisfying bit of a theory, but...
A game theory!
Oh, yeah. Shout out to MatPat fans out there listening, I guess, but after they defeat these Spearows and Ho-Oh leaves... Oh, just one last other thing. There's a lot of interesting subtle things about this show that I want to just give props to with the showrunners, and I think the inclusion of Ho-Oh is kind of a mark of genius, because, like I said before, when this show first premiered, like, there are definitely people who have finished playing the games and, like, have a knowledge about what's going on in the series already. By including Ho-Oh, not only are they showing a Pokemon that not even hardcore players of the games would have known about, but it also indicates to viewers, like, hey, if you watch this show, like, you might see brand new Pokemon that you've never even heard of before. And more often than not, like, the Pokemon anime is how you would get introduced to Pokemon that haven't been released in the games yet.
Not anymore.
True, but at least in the early days, in the pre-internet days, like, I think that was a very valuable tool that the show had. Then we got leaks, but at least for the time, I think as transparent of a marketing scheme, it is credit where credit's due. I think it's a very good bit of show writing there. So as the Ho-Oh leaves, Ash and Pikachu make their way to Viridian City, fighting all of the impulses in me to not sing that song just yet, but we hear, for the first time, the narrator. Well, we've heard the narrator of the series.
We've heard him at the beginning.
Yeah, we've heard the narrator at the beginning of the series.
Just want to give a quick little shout out to Roger Parsons, the voice actor who is credited as being the narrator for a majority of this series. Roger, thank you very much for being the literal narrator for so many young people's childhoods.
The narrator alludes to the fact that there is so much more to this world that we have yet to see, and as we see Ash and Pikachu making their way to Viridian City, with the first of many to be continues. Okay, this is a bit of a personal anecdote, but like when I was younger, whenever there was a to be continued, I always hated it when a show would pull a to be continued, because I would just, why can't you just tell me how it ends now? I always hated two-parters, but for some reason it never bothered me in Pokemon, partially because each episode felt self-contained.
Story.
Yeah, so that's probably why I never really minded or noticed the to be continued part of it, but we end on the signature Ho-Oh rainbow. And that's Pokemon I Choose You. So, Richard, what did you think of this first episode?
I got a lot of stuff about this first episode.
I mean, yeah, that's
not all of
the
which
fact that this thing is like over an hour long.
I mean, there's a lot of world building they have to do in a pilot, so it's always kind of excusable if it's not very good. But, I mean, it establishes a lot of the characters. Gary's a dick. Oak is probably a dick, too.
Yeah.
Everyone's a dick to Ash. Misty's a dick.
I feel like if there was a single complaint that to level against this episode, I think people give Ash too much of a hard time. But other than that...
He almost dies.
Yeah. Like...
Multiple times. It's a kid's show.
I mean, I feel like that's sort of meant to, like, raise the stakes and, like, present, like, an element of conflict that might be exciting.
Death for a 10-year-old.
Yeah, I mean...
How exciting.
I mean, I don't...
Isn't this thrilling other 10-year-olds watching?
I mean, it was thrilling to me. Like,
no.
Yeah, I mean,
I loved it.
Yeah, but...
This is just, as you get older, you're like, he almost fucking died.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you're when you're at that age, like, I don't think you really put a whole lot of thought into that part.
You don't really have an understanding of what death is, I guess.
But
for a lot of people that age.
Yeah.
Because they're all immortal.
Pretty much. But
especially the middle schoolers. They can't die. Just ask them. They'll tell you firsthand.
Yep.
They're immortal.
Yep, there is a reason why I am going into high school teaching. But
oh god,
all that aside, yeah, I agree. I think aside from the fact that people give Ash too much of a hard time, I think this is a very good, solid bit of world building. A lot of people hail this as their favorite Pokemon episode, and I'm like, I feel like there is definitely going to be a lot better.
Yeah, what about the one where James gets boobs?
Well,
oh wait, we don't get that one.
Well, I'm sure there will be plenty of more discussions.
That's my favorite episode.
Oh god. Well, I feel like there will be plenty of discussion to be had as we get into more of these episodes, but until then, I think we're just going to end it off there. For future episodes, the plan is we were going to try and do like our summary thing of 2 separate episodes per podcast, and then maybe even more so depending on like the type of episode there is. But because there's so much to this very first episode, we kind of had to like do it just around them. But next time, we're going to be definitely putting some close examination into what many
many people consider the best aspect of this show. Until then, just prepare for trouble.
Make it double.
But before we end today, I'm going to first introduce our Pokemusic ending segment, in which I scour online for the best remixes of the iconic tunes of Pokemon. And for this episode, we're going to be ending off by playing Shades of Red by Halsey. This track you can get on the site overclockedremix.com, where you can download and listen to the song for free. So please be sure to support Halsey and his work. But until then, my name is Henry Kathman.
I'm Richard Ballman.
Thank you so much for listening.
And we'll smell you later.
Bye!